and welcome to the weekly Q&A. So these aren't meant to be long, they're not meant to be exhaustive, just if you have any questions, this is my opportunity to try and answer a few of those for you. View it as those 5 minutes after class where you pick the brains of a professor. So this was just the first week. So there were a couple core questions around expectations, grading and everything, and I'm going to put those in the email for you so you don't have to listen to the whole video just to answer those. But there were 3 questions that I thought were warranted a further exploration and a minor little deep dive into. So we're going to talk about 3 things very, very quickly. The first is we're going to talk about what is the greatest misconception of forensic psychology. The second is we're going to talk about what is my favorite lecture or content within the course. And third, we're going to talk about learning during COVID. I'll try and be brief with all of them, and I'll timestamp them below so you can jump into the question that interests you. So let's just get started with the first question. What is the greatest misconception in forensic psychology? I think the easy answer would be the idea of what we're talking about in week 1, right? The boundaries of what a forensic psychologist can do. I always think that's the biggest misconception, this idea of what we're able to do and the confidence of that. But I don't think that's just forensic psychology. I think most of science has to deal with this misconception, the power and the boundaries of science. If I was going to talk about the greatest misconception of forensic psychology, I think what I'd probably say is the idea that forensic psychology is its own discipline. If you look at the philosopher Stephen Toulmin, he says that disciplines require a couple things. They require common language theories and conceptualization, common methodology, and a common group of people who all work together. And if you think about something like political science or philosophy, these are these are disciplines of studies. And I don't think forensic psychology is a discipline. The psychology is the discipline, and the subsets within it are then the disciplines that we go from. Forensic psychology is a domain, right? It's the target of our study. And what we differ in is we differ in the lenses that we bring to that. And one of the conversations I remember being involved in a few years ago was people were advocating for this idea of a dedicated discipline of the psychology of terrorism, that it was this new thing and it required new theories. And I was very against it at the time because to me that's a domain, right? Terrorism, extremism, whatever it is, that's the thing that we study. And you can study it as a psychologist, as a philosopher, as a political scientist, as a neuropsychologist, as a social psychologist. So I think that the biggest misconception is that forensic psychology is something that can be bound and defined as a sole entity. And I think it's more than that. I think there's more people engaging in forensic psychology, and it's broader and more diverse because of it. And I think in the first lecture I either said it half as a joke or not, but I describe myself sometimes as a cognitive psychologist, a military psychologist, and a forensic psychologist. But no, they're not 3 separate things. I study the military and I study crime, the police and the perpetrator. And I would say I do it predominantly from a cognitive standpoint, which is I think about cognition, and cognition being the mechanisms and processes that go on to lead to behavior. So I think that's the misconception that I draw to it. Now I think a true forensic psychologist, if you were to do a course or a master's in it, would be something that's far more clinical. But I think that the breadth of true forensic psychology is an undefinable collaboration of people who are interested in any area of crime and the human. So I hope that maybe clears up the size and scope of what we talk about when we use the word forensic psychology or forensic psychologist. A second question is what's my favorite lecture during the semester? And to me, there are always 2 things that I look forward to the most. The first thing I always look forward to is weeks, I think it's 5 and 6, where we look at the enhanced interrogation program. And the reason is that story, and I think the 10-year tale tells you so much about psychology in the real world, because you see the organizational pressures that led to the use of psychology in the way it was used. And then you couple that with this juxtaposition of what we think we know about how people behave, and then how we were kind of talking about it. And sorry, I should clarify, I'm talking about kind of the CIA's torture program, which was kind of, there was a heavy role of 2 or so psychologists in that, and it led to wide-scale debate and everything. And in this course, we unpack kind of where the psychology and the psychologists went, and you look at the end result, and you kind of, you think to yourself, well, it's obvious that psychology doesn't do that. Like, it's obvious that that's not how the mind works, or how memory works, or how interviews work. But because it was rolled up in this kind of post 9/11 world, we kind of found ourselves in this position. So I'm always excited to kind of challenge students' thinking and show them the kind of the darker side of psychology, and then the light that kind of came from it, and the way in which psychologists have now studied this. And in week 6, we kind of look at the what came next, right? And kind of the dawn afterwards of kind of validated, empirically backed science. And I love that story. The second one that always I look forward to is our lecture on crowds. And I think that it's now, I mean, it's probably now more relevant than ever. It might be more relevant than the torturing lectures now, kind of the idea of the psychology of the crowd. And one of the things that we're going to discuss is the kind of not only the psychology of a crowd, right? So the idea that how a crowd changes behavior and where that goes. But in looking at the theory of it, we're going to see this really interesting kind of politicization of psychological theory about how theoretical narratives of the crowd were used to kind of minimize their message. And you'll still see those narratives today. So I'm actually really excited about the crowd lecture, and kind of how we can think about that. And I guess if I were to do one more that I think, and this is going to sound a bit selfish, but the decision-making lecture is always one of my favorites, not just because it's kind of one of my main areas, but because I think it's one of the real lectures that you can learn something and take it home with you, like really apply it in your own lives, because the decision-making work we do is all about how anybody can make decisions when they're faced with uncertainty, right? And I think that we can all agree that we've all faced uncertainty. And so I found myself increasingly using this kind of military and police decision-making psychology, to help friends decide, when to have weddings, whether to move house, whether to change jobs, whether to break up with partners, right? They're all the same kinds of decisions. The context is completely different, but the structure is the same. And so that's one of those lectures that I love to show students, because you can really take something home with you, and maybe it'll even help you make decisions in your own life. And I teach a course on decision making. And I often have, emails after the course of people telling me, that like it actually helped, and it helped them learn about themselves and learn about some of their tendencies. And I think that's really cool. It's just to be able to kind of talk about something that everyone can kind of think about and use in the day-to-day, and to be able to kind of show that link between kind of crime and police psychology and the things that we do every day. So I'd kind of say that if I were to pick 3 favorite children amongst the course, I'd probably go with those, and the order may change depending on kind of what's happening at the time. And I guess the final question, just a kind of how can we all learn and stay engaged during COVID? And I think I've got kind of two answers to this. One is my hope is that designing the course the way that I have helps students engage, because it is kind of designed to try and be in the areas that you spend most of your time, and to try and maybe kind of be able to listen to it in different ways, and integrate it into your own life a little bit better. I'm hoping that's helping. But to me, I think if I had to give one answer, it would just be honesty. I mean, I think that, a few of the students I was speaking to kind of at the end of last semester, the biggest challenge that they had was kind of, something was happening in their life, and they had 3 or 4 assignments due, and they just weren't emailing professors and saying, like, I need an extra week, I need an extra 2 weeks, right? And from a professor standpoint, all I heard from my colleagues was that we were giving universal extensions. We understand what is going on in our lives and what is going on in everyone else's lives, and everyone understands that this is a stressful, atypical, ecological niche that we're all within right now, and we all have to be flexible. The same way our employers are flexible with us, joyfully are being flexible with students. So for me, I think the biggest thing you can do is always be honest. If you needed a few extra moments, if you need an extra week, if you are struggling with a deadline, if you need more time, I just think just tell a professor. Tell me, tell a professor, and they will accommodate you, because we are having to be flexible here, and we should be. And the only other thing I'd say is that without this face-to-face interaction, and being able to do hands-on learning and some of the activities that we've always done with these courses, maybe sometimes those theories, they're not quite clicking the way they are. Maybe it's not all coming together how it should. And again, the answer there is honesty. Sending an email and saying you don't get it. Jumping on a Zoom to talk about something properly. I think the fact that we've lost face-to-face conversation just puts more pressure on the need for kind of virtual interaction as much as we can in as many varied forms as we can. So in terms of learning, I mean, I'll do the best I can with the course that I'm developing and the assignments that we set. And if students just can honestly tell me when they need more, or they need help, or they need me to change something, that's the best thing we can do until we're allowed back into the classroom together next semester. So those were the 3 questions this week. I had a few kind of around the areas, and I kind of grouped them into those 3 broad topics, and hopefully as the contents gets more exciting and we start digging into the theories and the history and the misconceptions, we can find a couple questions each week that I can kind of just sit here on a Sunday evening and provide some answers to. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for week 1. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you're excited for week 2. I'm looking forward to releasing those materials tomorrow and seeing you on Thursday. So have a lovely evening and enjoy.